Our headlines today. 15 people suffering from hepatitis B died due to lack of medication at Eider Hospital, External Affairs Office. Health workers deliberately targeted by Ethiopian forces and their allies during the past year of the conflict, says Deputy for the Bureau of Health. Hello viewers, I'm here with the hour's news from Tigray TV. I'm Erinimano, will be reading the news for you today. Stay tuned. Let's now proceed to the details. Tigray External Affairs Office issued its weekly briefing discussing the overall humanitarian and socio-economic crises on Tigray, as well as international developments. Reporter Abil Tsagawu has more.
According to the brief, the situation in Tigray remains dire, as the Ethiopian government continues to obstruct humanitarian operations, permitting just 3% of necessary aid, 4.7% of the required cash for a meaningful humanitarian intervention. With humanitarian partners in Tigray now saying a minimum of 284 trucks are needed to arrive into Tigray to reach the millions in need of emergency assistance. The brief also shows the deteriorating condition of health care centers as health facilities continues to run low on medical supplies. The briefing said that 15 patients at Eider Referral Hospital suffering from chronic hepatitis patients have died due to the lack of medications, and there are 3,900 diabetes patients awaiting similar fate if medical supplies are not able to reach hospitals soon. The briefing appreciated the international community's effort to end the brutal siege, facilitate unobstructed humanitarian aid, and bringing about a negotiated ceasefire.
Last week, Association for Health Professionals in Tigray announced that it had so far confirmed the death of 30 health workers in the past year of the conflict. Now, Deputy Head for the Bureau of Health says that the health workers were deliberately targeted by Ethiopian forces and their allies from Eritrea while providing health care for patients. Dr. Rie said that this was part of the deliberate attack on Tigray's health system. It has also seen the destruction and looting of over 80% of health facilities in Tigray. Reporter Abraha Gauratinsai has more on this.
The destruction of health facilities in Tigray has led to the complete collapse of the health system, while the continued blockade of medical supplies has meant that Tigray's health system will not be able to treat the malnutrition cases that continue to overwhelm health facilities. According to Dr. Rea Isaias, Deputy Head of the Bureau of Health in Tigray, over 80% of health facilities across Tigray were destroyed by the Ethiopian troops and allied forces from Amhara region and neighboring Eritrea.
resilient ጠንካራ ዝበሃል بخمس عينت سرحيت زحلف 3 عامات استهانصه.
Tigray built a resilient health system in the past 30 years. The Ethiopian and Eritrean forces together with the Amhara forces targeted our health system. Much of that resources has either been destroyed or looted. I believe this is part of their intention to eliminate the people of Tigray.
حزب لعل 80% عنينين زله.
Over 80% of our health centers have now been completely destroyed. This means that they will no longer be able to provide services and that the community that was receiving medical care from these facilities is now going without it.
In addition to the destruction and looting of medical facilities, Dr. Rie also discussed the deliberate targeting of health workers.
Health workers from health package all the way to the Bureau of Health have been victims of the genocidal war. Health workers providing health care service to the public were deliberately targeted. Many were injured and have been killed.
Apart from the destruction of health facilities and deliberate targeting of health workers, Dr. Rie explained that the invading forces deliberately destroyed information and data related to Tigray's health system.
ማሕበረሰብ ዓለም ብመረዳእታ ኣብ ትግራይ ዝበጽሕ ዘሎ ጨፍጫፍ ግፍዒ ኸይርኢ.
The Ethiopian and Eritrean forces have completely damaged data collected in regards to the health system in Tigray as a way of keeping the world uninformed about the destruction committed on Tigray's health system. They have ruined, looted, and dismantled all the technologies, including computers and internet system in health facilities and in the Health Bureau itself to destroy all possible data about the health system in Tigray. They have also destroyed health system data that have been stored for many years.
There are over 2.2 million IDPs in Tigray, of which 169,000 are currently sheltered in schools and public facilities in Ma'ala. Many of these IDPs were largely supported by host communities that have now started to face hardships due to the siege that has halted all commercial goods, discontinued banking services, and blocked aid. Our reporters were on the ground at Zahra Samatat school to observe the conditions of the IDPs as the siege is approaching its 4th month now. Our reporter Fani Lemiru has more on that.
Due to the termination of banking services, electricity, blocking of the humanitarian corridor and other essential services, aid has not been able to reach the millions in need of emergency assistance, including internally displaced persons sheltered in public facilities across Tigray.
There is a huge problem here. For example, I'm a pregnant woman and I'm hungry. I always wonder how the children are still alive. They're eating boiled rice cooked without oil and salt because that's the only meal they can get here.
We only eat rice and bread. We have to share our foods because the supply is not sufficient to satisfy our needs. We eat what we find, even there are days that we don't get any food at all. The children are getting sick.
Lack of proper nutrition has especially affected the health and well-being of mothers and children and other vulnerable members of the community.
We're hungry. I personally was told that I will give birth through surgical procedure because I'm malnourished. In addition to that, there's no one that can look after me or help me while I'm in labor. I'm very stressed. There's nothing to eat in here. I would be happy if people and aid workers could help us.
NGOs and aid organizations should prioritize us and help us first, because if they fail to help us anytime soon, the children will start dying because of hunger.
8 months of conflict where food crops were destroyed and livestock were slaughtered has left millions in need of emergent assistance as the central government continues to impose an all-encompassing siege that includes a blockade of food aid and medical supplies. Our reporters were in Ma'ala Hospital to observe the effects of man-made famine on mothers and children. Our reporter Aragawi Gabra Mikhail has more on this.
According to estimates by UN organizations and the Bureau of Health, malnutrition in Tigray has reached an alarming rate, with 3.4% of children suffering from severe malnutrition, well above the global emergency threshold of 2%, and over 70% mothers some form of malnutrition.
He's suffering from malnutrition. I had no money to buy food, so I couldn't feed him. I brought him to the hospital yesterday. She used to take a variety of food before, but now I have nothing, so I had to bring her here. When she became ill, I had hope that she would eventually get well, but she didn't. As her illness got worse, I took her to a health center nearby, but they told me that they didn't have the medical supplies to help her. Then I asked them to write me a referral letter to a referral hospital. Now she's getting the medicine she needs and milk. Thanks to God, now she's fine.
Sister Lamlam Kidane is a nurse who works in the pediatric ward at Mekelle Hospital. She says the number of children suffering from severe malnutrition had shown a sharp increase. Sister Lamlam also said,
within 3 months, which is from July to September 2021, we have treated 72 children. Formerly, we used to treat only 7, 8, maybe 10 children. Also, most of the children that come to the hospital seeking treatments also have already reached severe level of malnutrition.
Sister Lamlam also explains that severe malnutrition will affect the child's growth and well-being long-term if they are not able to receive proper medical care.
As the mothers are also suffering from malnutrition, they are unable to produce breast milk for their infants. The worst thing is that the problem does not end here. Malnutrition at such a young age will affect the child's development and have long-term effects. So, as a community, we need to be able to support one another to ensure we can have a healthy community for the future.
The manager of Mekelle Hospital, Dr. Philemon Mesfin, said that the number of children with malnutrition is increasing in Mekelle Hospital, but the lack of medical supplies is making it impossible for the hospital to provide medical care.
We treat children with malnutrition here, but there is a scarcity of supplies. For example, there is a shortage of F17, F100, milk and other energy foods which are very important for malnutrition. The aids that we are receiving currently are very little compared to the degree of malnutrition cases coming into the hospital. According to our estimation, there are many more suffering from malnutrition in the rural areas of Tigray that are unable to reach hospitals.
Ethiopian and Eritrean forces have been committing horrific crimes in Tigray, which include mass killings as well as the destruction of public and private properties. Samur Agro Institute was one of the largest investments in agriculturally rich district of Raya Azo that has now been completely destroyed by the Ethiopian forces. Reporter Sablo Lemma has more on this.
Data from 2019 shows that over 7,286 private companies have invested over 200 billion, creating jobs and opportunities across Tigray. Raya Azabo in southern zone of Tigray is one of the agriculturally rich areas, with billions of private investment going into horticulture. Samur Agricultural Development Institute was one of the many private companies in Raya Azabo. And Tesfai Gabra Xavier is the owner and general manager of the institute. He said that his company was working in collaboration with corporations across the world to export agricultural products and improve how farming is done in Tigray.
لك بزا هجرة قاعد تخلو مجمرة نايزي عم مسرة مع أبز حرشات وعامي.
When they first come in, they initially targeted the agricultural institutions and started looting them and burning them down. This company was focused on horticulture, which constituted 80% of the investment, and the rest was invested on cattle breeding project. We were performing well. We used it to work on seed production with a Holland company named BSF as a joint venture. The research was conducted by the company for many years, but the war started right after we began exporting.
Mr. Tesfai also added that they destroyed every structure in the compound, machineries, farm field, greenhouses, as well as the trees surrounding this institution.
متعم بزح construction نيرو. طلع المريت منهم نجار يلا نحز توسيدي.
There were a lot of structures built here. However, they destroyed everything, including the modern greenhouses that covered 2 hectares of land and a net house on 2.5 hectares. We also had a complete automated irrigation system. They took as much as they can and burned many things, including cars. All I can say is that there is literally nothing left above ground. Our farm is the closest to the road, so I guess they just found it easy to attack.
Residents say that Samur Agro Institution had promoted economic growth in that they had relied on the opportunities it had provided.
This company was the reason many people in this area could sustain themselves. We were able to feed our families or pay the rent because we worked here. We benefited from the exported and locally sold products. Abiy Ahmed's soldiers destroyed everything in here, saying that this belonged to the junta. The greenhouse, they took it apart and took everything. The one over there looked like a palace with its flowers. You would have been very sad if you knew what this place looked like. I was almost shot when I tried to run away from them.
The owner of the company said that what happened there was a part of their genocidal campaign against Tigrayans and that it should never be repeated.
This was intentionally done to destroy every investment in Tigray. Unless otherwise, how would it justify the destruction of a farm place? It took me 18 years to build this place, but it will not take that long this time round. I am confident that I will be able to rehabilitate it in a short period of time. We will rebuild it even better.
The destruction of public infrastructures and facilities, including bridges, schools, healthcare centers, has been a common trend throughout this conflict. Our reporters were on the ground in Europe to observe the destruction of the service centers by the Eritrean forces. Reporter Abil Zagabo has more on this.
The destruction and looting of public service centers and property have been a common trend in the past year, with the largest-scale destruction of health facilities, education institutions, and public infrastructure like bridges, essential for the distribution of aid. We had visited Europe, where public servants tell us almost all public service centers have been completely destroyed. The head of the Office of Economic Affairs in Doha had attempted to show us the degree of destruction on these facilities.
Those were motorcycles, cables and other vehicles. They were used by the Office of Agricultural Affairs, and those on that far end were fuel tankers, but now they are all burned. Look at this tree. It is already burned together with tires and other plastics which we use it to place here.
already ኣብዚኣ ነቕምጠን ዝነበራ ኣቑሑት እዩ ተን ሓሪሩስ ናብዚ ደረጃ እዚ ይበፅሑ ዘሎ ማለት እዩ።
The ICD center for the district was completely burned by the allied forces of Ethiopia and Eritrea.
ብዝኾነ መዐቀኒስ ኣብ ዝኾነ ዘመን ንሕና ክንጥቀመሉ ብዘይንኽእል መንገዲ
We can't repair and renew the computer. The destruction was complete. This is a clear testimony to the fact that they don't want us to use any modern technology, or they hate the idea that there could be any progress here.
In addition, the infrastructure built in the district of Europe, including electric lines, water pipes, and telecommunication materials, have been completely discontinued due to the scale of destruction by Eritrean forces.
There were 4 big internet and network transmission equipment here. There used to be telephone, computers, and other services, but they are all gone now.
The administrator of the town Dohan, Murz Bayene, says the destruction and mass arbitrary killings continue in a part of Europe still under the occupation of Eritrean forces.
Some parts of the town of Agraale, Aletena, and the whole parts of Warat and Indalged are still under the control of Eritrean forces. The destruction you see here is continuing there. For instance, they recently destroyed a clinic. In Warat, they removed the doors and windows and took them to Eritrea. It is the same situation in Dalgada.
So far, 22 government institutions and 10 service stations have been destroyed by the Eritrean forces. The representative of the administration office of the district Europe says the loss is estimated to be above 500 million birr.
A total of 22 governmental offices and 10 public service centers which used to serve the community had burned into ashes, and they estimated to be 500 million birr.
Hate speech or genocidal rhetoric is a key feature of genocide, playing an instrumental role in justifying and normalizing the killing and suffering of a particular group, considered a minority or otherwise expendable member of the society. Ephraim Wolde Yohannes has more on the role of genocidal rhetoric targeting Tigrayans in Ethiopia.
Genocidal rhetoric is usually used by a state to create a sense of detachment from the suffering of a particular group and reversing the moral cost of killing. In Ethiopia, genocidal rhetoric is not only broadcasted on state media, but also routinely used by higher-level officials, framing the extinction of Tigrayans as detrimental for the continued existence of other groups.
የህዝብ የመላ ኢትዮጵያ ህዝብ ጠላት ነው። የህዝብ የኦሮሞ ጠላት ነው። የህዝብ የአፋሩ ጠላት ነው። የጋምቤላ ጠላት ነው። የሶማሌው ጠላት ነው።
Diakon Daniel Kibret, an advisor to Abiy Ahmed, went as far as comparing Tigrayans to the devil and called not only for the extinction but their eradication from history.
ከመዋቅራዊ ቦታቸው ብቻ አይደለም ማስወገድ ያለብን፣ ከሰው ህሊና፣ ከሰው ልቡና ውስጥ፣ ከታሪክ መዝገብ ውስጥ ነው ተፈቀው መጥፋት ያለባቸው።
ዝም ብለን በነፃ ከመሞት አንድ ትግሬ ገለን ብንሞት ዋጋ አለው። ምናልባት የትግራይ ህዝብ ብዛቱ 6 ሚሊዮን ነው። የአማራ ህዝብ የህዝብ ብዛት ደግሞ ወደ 30 ሚሊዮን የሚጠጋ ነው። ምናልባት እንኳን 6 ሚሊዮን ህዝብ ለትግራይ ብቻ ብንመድብ ሌላው ህዝብ ነፃ ሊወጣ ይችላል።
ትግራይ ለኛ ምናችን አይደለሽም እንጨብጣታለን።
Dr. Mu'az Gidai, a researcher at Tigray Institution for Policy Studies, says that the characteristics of the atrocities committed in Tigray are sufficient to qualify what happened in Tigray as a genocide, according to Article 6 of the Roman Statute of the International Criminal Court.
What makes the thing that happened in Tigray genocide can be seen from multiple vantage points. One is from the very concept of genocide. The very concept of genocide is inclusive of 5 major acts, which includes genocide by killing, genocide by causing physical and mental harm or suffering, genocide by creating a condition that threatens the very existence of a people. And the fourth one is genocide by causing damage to reproductive health or fertility of a given society. And the fifth one is by causing disintegration of society, or by separating children from their parents, or by causing a decay in a given society. So from those 5 major elements of genocide, almost we can say all of them has been committed in Tigray: physical destruction of individuals, mass killing and execution has been there, and causing severe physical and mental trauma has been there, and creating the very condition that causes mass deaths like exposure to diseases like COVID-19, and causing man-made starvation has been there. So we can say from the very elements of genocide, all of them has been committed in Tigray. And the second is from the nature of the war. The nature of the war has been a total war, which wasn't constrained neither by law nor by morality or common values of civilized society. It wasn't constrained by law because that weapons threshold, the nature of actors which have been killed and massacred, and even the nature of mobilization used was out of the formal type of war. So it was by nature a total war. And historically, total wars are always identified with genocide, and they cannot not be genocidal because their very nature doesn't respect law, doesn't respect morality, it doesn't respect common sense of a civilized society. Then they are easily to descend to genocide. And the third element is from the very impact which has been witnessed in Tigray. Thousands of innocent civilians has been killed because they are Tigrayans. The political elite of Tigray has been persecuted, killed, and there are many people still whose whereabouts is not known. So the very intention of destroying a given society, in part or in whole, has been demonstrated both in action and from point of view of the nature of the war declared against Tigray, and also conceptually, which has been enshrined in the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of Genocide, all has been fulfilled. So from those points, we can say actually what has been committed in Tigray is a genocide.
Dr. Mu'uz also says that the war on Tigray is a clear threat to the regional structure of peace and security of the Horn of Africa, and urgent intervention is needed to reverse current trends.
What happened in Rwanda has caused instability and political crisis in the neighboring countries and in the Great Lakes region. What happened in Kosovo between the Serbs and the Kosovos and between the Serbs and the Croats has actually caused a problem in the Balkan region. And so in general, we can say theoretically and empirically, we can say wherever genocide has happened, it has a spillover effect into the region. When we come practically to the Ethiopian and Horn of Africa reality, Ethiopia is an anchor state. So anything that happens in the negative in Ethiopia is going to affect negatively in the Horn of Africa. And practically there is also a new danger which the world has to be very careful. And it has to be taken as a warning actually. The involvement of the government of Somalia, Eritrea, in the internal affairs of Ethiopia in order to annihilate the Tigray people and the Tigrayan elite shows there is a build-up of a regional structure of genocide. So this regional structure of genocide is going to be a very grave danger to regional peace and security. It's not only a danger to regional peace and security, it's going to be also a bad example to other neighboring regions, both those regions beyond the Red Sea and to adjacent regions like the Eastern African region and the Central Africa region, or even to other regions in other continents, because it's unprecedented how different states has committed themselves to ally with a government which has declared genocide on its people is unprecedented experience. So we can say it's not only a matter of usual case of lack of peace and security, but a regional structure of genocide is being built up in the Horn of Africa.
And with that, we're going to wrap up our news for the hour. I'm Marinimana from Ma'ala Tigray. Thank you for tuning in to Tigray TV.